If your Phantom Forces settings are wrong, you are putting yourself at a huge disadvantage against everybody else in the lobby. Some of these settings directly affect how your game runs, how fast you react, and even how easy it is to win fights. Phantom Forces has changed a lot recently, and a lot of players are still using outdated settings that are actually holding them back. So today we're going through the best settings for 2026, including a few important ones that almost nobody talks about. By the end of this video, you'll have everything optimized so you can play smoother, react faster, and start dominating your lobbies. Alright, let's get started with the gameplay settings. First up is Field of View, also known as FOV. And if you've watched any of my settings guides before, you probably already know what I'm going to say. I talk about this every single time because FOV is the single most important setting in Phantom Forces. If your FOV is too low, you are literally seeing less of the game than other players. A higher FOV lets you see more of your surroundings, which means better awareness, easier tracking, and a faster reaction to flanks. Personally, I recommend 120, which is the maximum. I don't know any experienced players who don't play on 120, to be completely honest with you. It gives you the widest view possible and helps a lot with movement and awareness. If you are currently playing on something like 80 or 90, increasing this will make the game feel entirely different. And as an added bonus, it's significantly more fun to run around because it feels like you are flying. Next is rear sight transparency. This controls how visible your iron sights are when aiming down sights. A higher value makes the sights more transparent, which means they block less of your screen. I recommend keeping this around 0.8 so that the irons don't ever block the enemy. Invert Y-axis. This just flips your vertical mouse movement. Don't do it. Please. Dynamic stance. This affects how smoothly your character transitions between crouching and prone. I prefer leaving this on because it makes movement feel a lot smoother and more natural. Next is direct angular input, which is a setting that confuses a lot of people. This changes how the game processes mouse input. In theory, it makes your input more direct, but in Phantom Forces, it can actually make aiming feel a little inconsistent for some players. For most people, I recommend leaving this off. Damage numbers. This shows how much damage you deal every time you hit an enemy. I recommend leaving this on because it helps you understand weapon damage and know how low people are if they take cover. But I would advise making sure that they are small so they don't crowd your screen. PDWs and LMGs with 8 damage and 1000 plus RPM make the screen unbearably full. Stamina movement. This controls how stamina affects sprinting and movement. Most people keep this enabled, and I recommend leaving it on because disabling it can make movement feel a little strange if you're not used to the classic style. Now we move on to mouse sensitivity, which is another very important setting. Sensitivity is mostly personal preference, but you generally want something that feels comfortable and consistent. Personally, I run 1.25 on 855 DPI and 0.18 Roblox camera sense. This is a lot of specific numbers, but don't feel pressure to try my sense out. The most important thing here is to pick a sensitivity that feels comfortable to you and stick with it so you can build muscle memory. For a game like Phantom Forces, it's better to err on the side of a faster sense due to the arcade shooter style. Next is aim sensitivity, which controls your sensitivity while aiming down sights. Most players run this one slightly lower than their normal sensitivity to help with precision. I would advise using 0.8 to 0.85 because that's the standard for a lot of AAA shooter games. Double tap sprint is a pretty popular one with some people. When this is enabled, sprinting activates if you double tap the forward key. Personally, I don't like relying on double tapping buttons, and it can seriously hinder more advanced movement strategies. I would advise keeping it off if you can. Now we get into some pretty unimportant settings such as hi-fi and lo-fi 3D animation time dedication. This pretty much just controls the processing time for 3D and third-person animations. If you're struggling with performance, you can lower these, but it won't do a whole lot. Selected lobby style, as the name suggests, just changes the lobby. No gameplay change, but I personally enjoy New Year's 2024. Next is toggle lobby weapon models and sounds. When this is enabled, weapon models will appear in the lobby and sounds will play. It doesn't affect gameplay at all, so again, this is just preference. Return to main menu on despawn does just that, so I keep it on. And then finally, debugging hitboxes and bullets shows some interesting information if you're curious. But I don't suggest them in normal gameplay, for obvious reasons. Alright, now we move on to the display settings, and this section is mostly about visual clarity and performance. Some of these can make the game look nicer, and others can actually help improve FPS and reduce visual clutter. First up, we have the game object section. These settings control a lot of the visual effects that happen during gameplay, like ragdolls, bullet holes, particles, and shell casings. This is another big one. I highly recommend keeping the ragdolls off. They can bog down performance with almost no benefit other than a chuckle with ragdoll fun factor kicked up. Also, it's no fun getting killed because you think some random dude prone in a corner is a dead body. Bullet holes, however, should stay on because when you're sniping, they can help you adjust to the bullet drop-off. Otherwise, you would just have to memorize every sniper and the bullet velocity individually, which isn't worth anybody's time. I also keep Roblox particles turned off because they add unnecessary visual noise during fights. And then for first-person bullet casings, I usually leave these on due to their minimum effect on performance, but if you're trying to max out your frame rate, turn it off. Next is the HUD section, which controls everything that appears on your screen during gameplay. Most of these should simply stay enabled because they provide important information. For example, ammo HUD, name tags, kill feed, radar HUD, round HUD, crosshairs, and hit markers. All of these help you understand what's happening in the match, so I recommend keeping them on. I personally disable chat because I always get distracted by typing mid-round. Also, I keep vote kick pop-ups disabled because they get a tad annoying sometimes. You can still vote with Y or N even if the pop-up doesn't appear, so keep that in mind. And streamer mode is aura, so do as you wish with that. Moving on, this next section is actually one of the most important parts of display settings because these options directly affect performance. First is global shadows. I strongly recommend turning this off as shadows both reduce performance and hinder your ability to see the enemy. It is actually difficult to see the phantoms blue in the dark shadows. Next is Roblox Shaders. This mostly affects lighting and how the game looks visually. I personally keep this on because I have a stronger PC, but if your device is struggling, turning this off could be extremely beneficial to running this smoothly. The next few settings are muzzle flashes and smoke effects when you fire your gun. I prefer to have these off because they can be bright and vaguely distracting for no benefit at all. Tracer visibility through optics, on the other hand, can be very helpful. By seeing the bullets as they fly, you can get a much better feel for how the bullet velocity and drop-off works. I highly recommend keeping this one on regardless of how many frames you have. Then we have the weapon camos and details on drop. Neither of these really impacts performance at all, so I'd recommend keeping them on. Plus, I've got all these cool skins that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And last but not least, we have scaling settings. These control the size of different UI elements. The ones that you can change include the in-game HUD, the radar, the kill feed, player status, the leaderboard, and chat. For most people, leaving these around 1.0 works perfectly. The only thing I personally reduce slightly is chat scale because the chat box can sometimes take up a lot of space. And that is the last of the game and display settings. Finally, we're going to go over a few helpful tricks for the keybind section. I play on keyboard, but these should also work for controller too if you custom bind them. One of the most common keybind changes is from sprint hold to sprint toggle, which makes it so you only have to sprint once to enable it every time you run. This can save time between sprinting and walking and can also free up a button on the controller, which is extremely helpful. But I actually think this might be default on controller. It can also be very helpful to change the movement keybinds to fit your hand and playstyle better. I'm a big fan of having slide as left control, as that fits along with the left shift for sprint hold. But you could also set slide and jump as buttons adjacent to each other for fast movement tricks. Finally, I would recommend that everyone set spotting as something you can easily click. It takes a second to ping enemies on your screen for your team, and it nets you extra points, which build up over time. And that's going to be a wrap on the best settings for 2026. Most of these settings won't magically turn you into a pro overnight, but getting everything optimized can make the game feel so much smoother and more consistent, which absolutely helps you win more fights. If you have any niche settings or tricks, feel free to leave them in the comments so other people can try them out as well. Drop a like and sub for more.